Hello and welcome to the 105. I'm Cooper Petagna. That's 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Andrew Ivins. We got a great show for you today, this Wednesday. Drew, guess what? Rankings week. It's next week. But those of you who listen, we spoil you with the preview. We're talking quarterbacks. We're talking who is potentially on the cut line for their fifth star. We do that here at 24/7 Sports. Who's got a pathway in to the top 32 as well? We'll talk about that. But, Drew, it's a big week here at 24/7 Sports because, well, we welcome a new family member, and that is PowerMizzou.com. And with that, we welcome in our friend, recruiting editor Sean Williams from PowerMizzou.com because it's time for a little bit of a Missouri vibe check. Sean, how do you do, my friend? And we're going to start with a feel-good meter. I'm going to ask you the question since we don't really get to talk a lot of Mizzou, and we have a new team site here. Mizzou right now, they rank number 16 in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team rankings. They are number 19 in the 24/7 Sports Talent Team Composite. That is the highest it's ever been in Missouri history. Sean, the question I have for you, what is the feel-good meter right now when it comes to Eli Drinkwitz in just recruiting as a whole at Mizzou right now?
I mean, under Eli Drinkwitz, it's at a historic level right now. So, I mean, the vibes are really good. The fans are really excited. Obviously, Missouri's undefeated right now. They're in the top 10. Keep things rolling. I think the measuring stick for them is getting into college football playoff this year. And I think if they do that, things will continue to roll positively in the recruiting ranks for Missouri going forward.
Sean, you mentioned Missouri undefeated right now. Big one on Saturday against Texas A&M. And I think it's a perfect question I have for you, right? We are officially 10 weeks before the early signing period. I think we're calling it signing day now. That's the official term behind the scenes at 24/7 Sports. Cooper said it, the class right now, right number 16. They just added a promising tight end prospect a few days ago in Dakota Terrell. Big giant out of Oklahoma. Who else is in play for Missouri? Because they're going to have some momentum, I would think, if they can continue to be in the conversation for the college football playoff.
Yeah, I think in terms of just guys that are still out there, uncommitted and committed elsewhere, some guys that they're really looking at, kind of a trio. Andrew Babalola is kind of the big one out of the Kansas City area. They've been recruiting him really hard. Drinkwitz just took his helicopter over there to watch his first game of the season. So I know that made a strong impression on him. A lot of buzz around Auburn, Michigan, Stanford with him as well. So we'll see what happens there. I know he said he's kind of been a little bit erratic on his when he's going to make a decision. He did say recently he's going to make it at least by the end of his regular season, which is in late October. So we'll see how that goes down, but I think Missouri's made a positive impression on Babalola, and we'll see if he wants to stay close to home and play for the Tigers. And I think a couple other guys that are committed elsewhere that they're trying to go after is Jeremiah Jones. He's a tight end that's committed to Nebraska recently. You mentioned Dakota Terrell just committed, but get the feeling that Missouri really wants two tight ends in this class now. Things, obviously change in the recruiting outlook for classes. So they got Dakota Terrell. They got him on campus recently for the Buffalo game. They've had Jones on campus twice in late July, and then he was recently in for the Boston College game as well. So they really like Jeremiah Jones and his playmaking ability at tight end. Obviously, at high school level, he's such a playmaker. He lines up wide and everything, plays safety as well. So he's another target that they're really after. He spoke very positively on Missouri, and I think that's a prospect they can potentially flip down the road, considering how their season will go if it goes well. And another big offensive target that they're after that is committed elsewhere is Jacob Washington. He's the current Michigan wide receiver commitment. Intriguing kind of storyline here is he actually took an official visit to Missouri back in the summer in June. And at the time, after he took his official to Missouri there, he said, hey, Missouri is my top school, but that was before he went to Michigan. And eventually took his official to Michigan, ended up committing to the Wolverines there. Obviously, still looking around. He did tell us recently that, he's still talking to Missouri staff, is hearing them out, and he's planning to come back to campus and watch Missouri play Oklahoma in November. So that's one to keep an eye on as well.
Sean, I want to follow up on Andrew Babalola, the five-star offensive tackle, one of the best in the country. We haven't heard Missouri really linked to Andrew Babalola a lot. It's been a lot of Auburn, been a lot of Michigan, and with Stanford early on as well. How would you handicap the chances here for Missouri and Andrew Babalola?
Handicap, I would say decently good. I don't know where you can classify that, but I think obviously the buzz here is kind of like, Michigan, Auburn. I think Stanford's got some appeal too because of academics and things like that. But everything we're hearing from Missouri's side, they feel that they're really in the race here. So that's why I'm kind of like a little bit more optimistic than maybe most people, just from what we're hearing on Missouri side of things. And obviously, Drinkwitz is showing that he's trying to, press all the right buttons going to his game and making a strong impression there. So we'll kind of see how that all plays out.
Coop, man, if they get Babs, that would fire me up. We wrote about it on PowerMissouri.com. Just some different, our thoughts on the recruiting class. The strength seems to be that offensive line. Sean, I wanted to ask you two kind of recruitments that I think flew under the radar from a national perspective, but in the eyes of the 105, they were major, major wins for the Tigers, for Drinkwitz, and that's that. The first one, Matt Zollers, the quarterback commit. We saw him at the Elite 11 finals. He had a nasty broken ankle, out for the rest of his senior season, but you can still see the upside with him. He was a big win. Alabama, Georgia, both involved there. And then the other one, Donovan Olabode, I think he's one of the more ready-to-play wide receivers in this 2025 cycle at IMG Academy. Huge rankings riser for us. How did Missouri kind of get both of those guys in the boat? I know they've recruited well in the past locally in the Show Me State, but these are guys, Zollers up in Pennsylvania, Olabode all the way down at IMG Academy. Does Drinkwitz have those chops as a recruiter? I feel like that's not discussed enough.
Yeah, I think it goes a long way. I mean, you talk about Zollers, from Pennsylvania. I mean, Missouri hasn't had a recruit sign with them from Pennsylvania since 2013. So, that's not an area of the country that they really recruit really hard. So, it was really big. Zollers is kind of one of those, they just really loved his film, got in on him really early. And the biggest thing with him is getting him on campus twice during the spring. That really helped, just making an impression there. And, just kind of showing him what he can do in that offense and why he's kind of the perfect fit for them. So that was big for them. And kind of the same thing with Olabode too. They're both of those guys, they were able to get them in on campus during the spring, make a really big impression that way, and then get them back on official visits in the summer. So, I think those, getting in on those guys, building those relationships early, and then being able to get those guys on campus during the spring and kind of show them, the practice reps and things like that and how coaches coach their players and kind of build that rapport. I think that really helped out in those two situations and others in the class as well.
Sean, I don't know if a top 20 class can be sneaky, and Missouri's sitting right there at number 16, knocking on the door of a top 15 class. I wanted to ask you, out of all the additions that they have, and there's a long list of guys that we really like in this class, but is there maybe a commit that doesn't really get the headlines as some of these guys at the top of a board, as a Olabode or as a Jack Lang, and you can continue on, but is there a guy or two that has caught your eye?
Yeah, I know. We had Gabe had Alan True and Tom Loy on yesterday. They both mentioned Jason King, but I'm going to go with Mark Manfred, the cornerback out of Sprayberry, down in Georgia. I mean, he's having a really good I loved him whenever he committed, but his senior film is really good so far. I mean, he's one of those guys that, I always like cornerbacks or DBs. They can play both sides of the ball, in high school, and are very productive on both sides of the ball as well. He plays wide receiver for his team. I think he's got close to 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think he's got 27 tackles in the secondary and 5 pass breakups. I mean, he's doing a really good job on both sides of the ball. When you're that productive as a senior on both sides of the ball, I think that kind of translates well to being a good college player.
Coop, I'm a big fan of Mark Manfred. He was a standout at the overtime OT7. I don't know if you've dug into him, but certainly a lot to like. And I think what stands out about this Missouri recruiting class last year, really heavy with the defensive additions and some notable ones, Williams and Nwaneri, Elias Williams, the defensive lineman. This year in 2025, it seems like they've gone more towards the offense with getting Zollers, Olabode, and again, that offensive line class. We haven't even talked about Lamont Rogers, right? I think he's the left tackle of the future there.
Yeah, Lamont, another one, is kind of goes back to, the high level of recruiting, getting those guys in during the spring, making an impression while they're on campus and, kind of getting a commitment from them during the summer. That's kind of what happened with Rogers as well. And Rogers kind of, he's one of those ones you're going to have to fight. I think he's going to actually be at Texas A&M this weekend for the Texas A&M Missouri game. Obviously, that's at A&M. Not a good thing for Missouri, but even though Missouri will be on the field, but he's one of those guys you're going to have to fight for. A&M's really in the mix, and it'd be kind of big for him. But yeah, I mean, like he's going to be prototypical, just tackle guy that's going to probably come in and I don't know, he might make a pretty strong impression right away. But A&M's making a big push. I think the biggest thing for Missouri is trying to get him back on campus during the season and get him in for a game. I think that I'll feel a little bit more confident that Missouri can hold on to him if that happens.
Sean, we'll get you out of here on this question. We talked about the momentum that Missouri has on the field and off the field as well, equally. How high is the ceiling there, just in terms of how high you think Eli Drinkwitz can take this program? We know what they're capable of on the field, but off the field, is this a top 10 recruiting program? Do you see that in the sights over the next 2 to 3 years?
I think it's very possible. I mean, I think, with anything, especially with recruiting, it's really about performance on the field. And like I said, their goal this year is to go to the playoff. And if they can go to the playoff and make a run, win a game or two, I mean, I think that would be huge for their program. And, top kids is take notice. They're taking notice anyway. I mean, Drinkwitz has done a great job recruiting and he knows the game. So, but I think if wins trickle down and they make a little playoff run, that'll definitely help their efforts in the future. And top 10 recruiting classes might be a thing that Missouri is kind of consistent with. I mean, they're at historic peaks right now. There's always room for improvement. If you can get in the top 10 consistently, though, then that makes you pretty good.
Sean Williams, we appreciate you stopping by. That is Sean Williams, recruiting editor over at PowerMizzou.com. Sean, thanks a lot, guys. Just a reminder, you can visit PowerMizzou.com. 75% off annual subscriptions right now. Deal runs out tomorrow. Make sure you get over to PowerMizzou.com. We are very excited to have those guys on board. They're definitely going to make us better. A lot more Missouri talk in the future. Drew, excited about Missouri, excited about Eli Drinkwitz. I think it's one of the, I would say, more underlying stories that we haven't talked about. When I wrote the talent team composite breakdown just a few weeks ago before the season, Missouri is one of those teams that you just kind of look up, right? They're not in that upper echelon of the conversation yet, but they're in the top 20. We've seen teams now kind of in that mid-teens range kind of put it together, along with offensive line experience and quarterback as well. But Missouri, man, it's kind of interesting in this new look SEC. Everybody thinks Texas, Oklahoma, what's it going to look like? Missouri is one of those teams that you just cannot rule out where they're going to be if Eli Drinkwitz is going to continue to be there and build on the success that he's already had the last couple of years.
Took down Ohio State right this past bowl season. I think a lot of people forget about that. Yeah. Blake Baker, the defensive coordinator, friend of the show, he's off to LSU, but there hasn't been much of a drop-off so far. We really haven't seen a ton. We don't have a ton of context of what Missouri looks like on the field this season, Cooper. Hey, but they're in the kind of, first game on Saturday. They're in that big slot where I think a lot of eyeballs are going to be on the Tigers. And just want to point out, like, this guy named Luther Burden still plays for Missouri. You see some takes out there that if Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith were draft eligible, they would go 1-2 when it comes to the receivers in the 2025 NFL draft. I'd pump the brakes there. This Luther Burden guy is pretty good as well.
I didn't call Sean Ryan Williams, did I? Ryan Williams has been on the top of my mind. I was worried about that through the whole segment. Sean, if you're listening out there and I called you Ryan Williams, I apologize truly.
I had a buddy text me, the new EA Sports 2025 rankings come out, and he's like, they don't have Ryan Williams high enough. I'm like, whoa, like the country does not know about Ryan Williams until a week ago. Let's pump the brakes on where he needs to be rated. In
all fairness, I do think he's like an 82. I think he's proved himself out of that, but to each their own. All right, time to talk about some 5-stars, and I'm excited about this conversation because our process has changed a little bit over the last year or so, awarding 5 stars a little bit earlier in the process. That means as we watch the senior tape, some of those 5s can come off of these prospects, and some of these guys can get awarded a 5th star as well. Drew, we have an update Next week, it's about anywhere from 5 to 7 weeks into the high school season around the country for the majority of prospects. We've seen a lot, feel pretty good and confident going into this next update, not only about the top 32, but some of the guys knocking on the door as well, and the context needed for maybe those guys to kick down that door and get into the top 32. But let's start with the most impressive. You have been not only running through the top of the board, but the entire 247 like an absolute madman. But let's stick in the realm of the first round. Who's the most impressive dude out there so far, in your opinion, 5-6 weeks into their senior season?
Well, I know we're going to talk in depth about the quarterbacks at the top, right? Bryce Underwood, Tavian St. Clair, Keelan Russell. Get ready for that conversation. So I didn't use one of them for the most impressive prospect. I'm going with my number one freak here, Cooper. Jonah Williams, out of Galveston, Texas, Ball High School. I mean, we have said it in this space over the airwaves, on YouTube. He is one of a kind, and he really is. Cooper, this is how he opened up his senior season. First, I guess, snap, returns a kickoff for a touchdown. Then he blocks an extra point. He's playing wide receiver, wildcat quarterback. They use him in the deeper third. He picks off passes. We've gone back and forth about trying to identify a player comp for Jonah Williams. And I think anyone that is watching college football this season, right, I want you to think about Malachi Starks at Georgia. I think there's some kind of similarities there in terms of how you can use Jonah Williams as a chess piece on defense. He can man up and he can cover in the slot. He can run with the tight ends. You can also have him patrol the alleys. You can also have him play deep over the top. I also think, we watching on Sunday night, some shades of Kyle Hamilton out there. So I'm going Jonah Williams. I think the biggest thing with him is what's his position. To me, it's one of these cases where don't overthink it, right? He's built like a defensive end, runs like a wide receiver, and he covers like a corner, and he can hit like a linebacker. I mean, I'm all in on Jonah Williams. I think it's a huge pickup for Texas. Remember that one went down the wire. LSU, Texas A&M involved. That is a massive, massive addition. I think this time next year, Cooper, we could talk about Jonah Williams, getting some snaps here and there as a 5-star freshman for the Longhorns.
I think some people might have some hesitation, maybe marrying up the comp between a Jonah Williams and a Malachi Starks. And the only reason I say this, don't jump on me, I'm coming to your defense here, is because Jonah Williams is a very difficult player to try to put in a box and really try to compare to anybody. I mean, guys like Derwin James come up, guys like Kyle Hamilton come up. You can go down the list. Isaiah Simmons was a name we threw out there. The thing that you brought up, which I think is interesting, Jonah Williams, your number one freak in your entire freaks list here in 2025, that was Malachi Starks in 2022. Malachi Starks was a guy that we kind of went back and forth with. Gabe Brooks of our scouting team thought maybe linebacker. I thought, all right, this guy's going to be a star nickel, which is where he's ended up playing. The versatility of what he can do kind of speaks volumes to the athlete. And I think in the same breath, that's what we're saying with Jonah Williams. Drew, he's got maybe an inch and a half on Malachi Starks. He runs in the low 4.5s. He's a freak. He plays baseball as well. You talked about his base-to-base time speed that he has. I mean, he is a legit prospect. I can't wait to kind of see him in that Pete Kwiatkowski defense at Texas. So love that pick from you. Not surprised by it. I'm going to stay on defensive side as well. Try to stay away from those quarterbacks because I know we're going to talk about them. How about Elijah Griffin? This was a guy that we had inside the top 10. He's playing lower level ball in Georgia. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, Elijah Griffin's one of those guys. He's really going to have to dominate the competition here for us to be so convicted and stamp him as a top 10 prospect. Well, message received, and Elijah Griffin looks like an absolute, I don't even know, dominant force, right? I mean, the guy can play the 1 technique, the 3 technique, the 5 technique. It's almost kind of like Walter Nolan-ish. DJ Hicks has kind of come to mind, 2 former 5-stars that both signed at Texas A&M. Walter Nolan now at Ole Miss. But this guy can do a lot of different things. He checks all the boxes that you would want from a height, weight, speed standpoint, speed to power. I love his first step quickness, his ability to consistently penetrate. He lives in the backfield, Drew. This kid, he's been buttoned up. I don't know how much you've watched of him this year. I know you've seen quite a bit of him, but he's been a fun one. And he wasn't exactly a guy that I thought going into this exercise could really help his stock more than he already has. And yet here we are. That's one of those guys you kind of come away, you grab your stamp, and you say, okay, he's a dude.
Coop, I don't think you believed us when we kept bringing him up on the calls because you hasn't had a chance to watch the tape yet. You saw those highlights right there. This is a kid that had a 34.6-inch vertical jump at the National Combine 2 years ago. And I know people get so exhausted with us throwing data and numbers at them. But when you watch and look and see the body composition, and then you bake into the fact that, okay, he had one of the highest verts at a camp of 1,000 individuals, it's a bit freaky. I call him a disruptive interior force that fuses together elite physical traits with an advanced feel for the game. And yeah, I've watched, I think, 2 or 3 of his games. Coop, actually, last night I was watching Josh Petty, the Georgia Tech 5-star offensive lineman. Wanted to see his best on best competition. I'm like, whoa, he played Savannah Christian. And then it's just kind of Elijah Griffin, rep after rep after rep. And I'm going to say this, Cooper, the sophomore next to him, who we have ranked very high in the 2027 cycle, the Damian Guyton. Whew, dude, that kid wanted to jump into 2026. I mean, he's holding at the top. He looked like the real deal as well. So I love that pick from Elijah Griffin as well.
Be careful. He's probably listening. Elijah Griffin is a guy we like. We talked about these quarterbacks a little bit. Drew, here's another thing on Elijah Griffin. Is he, like, in your mind, one of the safest prospects in this class? We don't really talk about that category. We talk a lot about developmental upside and high ceiling prospects. We don't really talk about, like, what I love, the combination of ceiling and floor. That's what I feel like with Elijah Griffin. I feel like you're getting a day one impact player that can continue to develop at the next level, that has high level Sunday potential when you're projecting them 3 to 4 years down the line.
Coop, here's my thought when I watch him. Like, Georgia kind of needs him there in the middle, right? They've been missing that guy that can kind of dictate what the other team does. And obviously Georgia's loaded, ton of NFL guys on defense, but I think they kind of have that void, right? The true difference maker in the middle that, can plug gaps and can also push protection. And I think Elijah Griffin potentially is that guy. Is he the safest person? Yeah, I think from what we've seen on tape, ask me after the All-Star games, would like to see him. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we get him at one of those. Georgia's not pulling him to simulate someone on the scout team during CFP practices. But yes, I would think he's one of the cleanest. Can I use that term, clean, for Elijah Griffin?
It's my favorite term. I love that. Speaking of clean, these 5-star quarterbacks, they're pretty darn good. Bryce Underwood, the number 1 player in the country. I don't know if anybody out there has been keeping up with Bryce Underwood and what he's done throughout his entire high school career, but it's a little different in the fact that, Drew, he's been using his legs a lot more, almost to the point where you see him as a senior, and it kind of changes the way that you view him as a prospect on Saturdays and beyond, because we've seen more Bryce Underwood, the athlete, than we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years since he's been playing high school football. I don't know what's gotten into him, but I like it.
Coop, 61 of 83, just over 1,000 yards, 17 touchdowns, 1 interception. Here's what stands out: 311 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns. Let's go back to post Elite 11 finals. We said there was a battle at the top: Bryce Underwood versus Tavian St. Clair, the Ohio State commit. I came into this update thinking, hey, maybe Tavian St. Clair is going to be number 1, right? With 9 weeks to go before signing day. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think Bryce Underwood has taken his play to another level. You said it, the field command, the confidence, how he is throwing it. He is the term I used, I think, in a text message to you. Everyone else looks like they're playing Heisman difficulty in EA Sports 2025. Bryce Underwood looks like he's playing freshman, right? He is just in complete control of everything that's going on around him. I'm going to throw out this player comp. Producers might be a little upset because they want us to save it for next week's show. He reminds me of Vince Young. That's the player comp I've settled on. I think his ability to not only throw the football, but you said it, that big frame dynamic athlete, what we have seen from him as a runner. I think this is a guy that can step into the situation there at LSU, and he can provide some magic. So very impressive from Bryce Underwood thus far, what we've seen. Remember, he really wasn't at a ton of camps, only played in one 7-on-7 tournament. So there was some, not questions, but we just kind of wanted to get more data points. And so far this season, he has been excellent.
That's why you watch the tape, why you watch the senior tape. I think a lot of times, the off season is good in terms of the supplemental data points to kind of point you in the right direction in terms of what are the questions that need to be answered. And the biggest question we had, who's the guy at number one, right? Is it Bryce Underwood? Is it Tavian St. Clair? Is it a guy like a charging Keelan Russell? You could go a lot of different ways. Bryce Underwood, at least in one man's opinion, now has a firm grip on this position in terms of what he's looked like physically. And you said it, Drew. He looks like a complete player once you talk about the command of the position, the athlete himself, the arm talent. You combine all those different things. Bryce Underwood is going to be a guy ready to play. That's going to be an interesting quarterback situation there in Baton Rouge. Garrett Nussmeier, we'll see what happens with him after this season. You got guys like Ricky Collins, Colin Hurley. It's going to be a pretty fascinating spot for a collegiate ready player like Bryce Underwood, who's played a lot of football, to be able to go in there and compete. The guy that we thought was the biggest challenger to Bryce Underwood was Tavian St. Clair. And I'd like to call you a Tavian St. Clair truther. You have always loved this guy, and there is a lot to like. We thought coming off Elite 11, he'd probably get drafted in day 3 of the NFL draft just based off looks, T-shirt and shorts. This guy, Drew, I kind of go back and forth a little bit. Like when you see him live in person in the offseason in that type of pro day setting, your jaw just drops. You're really floored with the player. I've always felt like there's a little bit of disconnect between that exposure and maybe the on-field exposure. What we've seen as a senior is a little bit of those two exposures coming together, being more of a complete player. I thought he's played really well. I thought he's had some really good moments. I'm more excited about maybe Tavian St. Clair than I was in the offseason, and that's saying a lot because I thought he left on a high note coming off the Elite 11.
You're coming to the dark side there. And I don't want to take anything away from Tavian St. Clair about what I said with Bryce Underwood. I think he's elite. He's the real deal as well. We have a 99 grade on him. And Cooper, you're right. Tavian is more of that, to steal a term from Daniel Jeremiah over at the NFL Network, he's kind of a driving range quarterback, right? You see him in the camp setting and your jaw kind of drops because it's so clean. It's so smooth. He can make all of the throws. You turn on the game tape and it hasn't really all kind of come together. But I think as a senior, there are certainly strong spells of play that he has put together. The thing that stands out to me about him is just how he's able to distribute on the move, right? When he gets rolling outside of that pocket, very coordinated, never really off balance. Now he can make some off platform throws if he needs to, but I think the accuracy when he's rolling out, player comp I got written down here, Justin Fields. And I know Justin Fields had a little career resurgence on Sundays with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think it fits, right? I think that is what Ohio State is getting. And some Buckeye fans want to roll their eyes at that. Justin Fields is pretty good in Columbus. And I think Tavian St. Clair has that same kind of upside, that same type of potential. And I think they play very similarly.
I think the thing with Tavian that's going to be interesting, we're going to talk about Keelan Russell here in a second. We just talked about Bryce Underwood. I think those two have played a lot of ball at a very high level where they're going to be able to acclimate maybe a little bit earlier than a guy like Tavian St. Clair. And I think Tavian St. Clair, although talented, I think his timeline is going to look similar to a guy like Nico Iamaleava or Arch Manning. I think that redshirt year is going to be so important for him. Obviously, he's going to have to battle guys like Julian Sain. We'll see what happens with that Ohio State quarterback room. But he's going into a good spot, Drew, and obviously he's going to play behind a good offensive line. He's going to have a good rushing attack. Who knows? Hopefully he gets to throw the ball to Jeremiah Smith, right, for the next 2 years. At some point, we'll see if that happens. But Tavian St. Clair going to a good situation. I think timeline, development, polish, all that's going to be really important for his development. Drew, the next guy we want to talk about, Keelan Russell, he's been all the buzz, especially in our group chat. We knew this kid was wired differently even before he showed up in LA over the summer, just because of his record at Duncanville. And then going into this year, you're kind of thinking like, all right, how can he possibly top that? Drew, he's been really good. And another guy that we are getting a little bit more confident in, more comfortable with the legs, the entire skill set. But, the guy that he kind of reminds us of here, and I want to make sure I put some context around this player comp, a little bit of Jaden Daniels. And what I mean by that, it's more of the pocket movement than anything, along with the size and the frame. But his ability to extend plays in the pocket. He's got a little bit of that pocket magic. He can play off platform as well, but this is a guy that wants to slice and dice you from the structure of the offense. He is fun. You talk about timing, anticipation, instincts. we talk about proactive and reactive passers. He's a proactive passer. He is playing the game. He is not reacting to anything. This is a guy that has control, full control of a Duncanville offense. Wow, Drew. Just really impressed with this kid from top to bottom. Love watching him play. And quite honestly, love the way that he's wired, right? So you take all those physical attributes, combine it with the intangibles, you got yourself a dude here in Keelan Russell.
Well, we said go back to the summer coming out of the Elite 11. Remember, Keelan Russell won the MVP, voted on by the Elite 11 staff. We had Tavian St. Clair. He was our number one guy. Right behind him was Keelan Russell. There was some conversations about making him our alpha dog. In hindsight, maybe should we have pushed that further along? Keelan Russell, there's been two quarterbacks at the top, Underwood, St. Clair. I think Keelan Russell has made a strong case that it's actually a big three based on what we have seen. You said he's at Duncanville. What do we continue to bring up, Cooper? Duncanville's a bit of a superstar team. I think they don't have the greatest offensive line this season. And really the exposure point, the data point for me that kind of got me even more fired up about Keelan was them against St. Francis Academy, who has some twitched up pass rushers. There's one play where Keelan Russell, Zion Ely, our number one ranked edge in 2026. I mean, Keelan snaps the ball. Ely's right there in his face. Keelan spins out, runs around, he gains about 5 yards, but that athleticism, that sack avoidance, not a lot of quarterbacks can do that in this class. He is a playmaker. He's a playmaker, and he will take some risks, and I kind of love that about him, right? He knows when the situational call, all right, I can take a risk here. I can take a shot here. He kind of balances that fine line so well. He's a complete gamer. You said it. We've seen more from him and how he can move in the pocket. When he first came on the scene, Cooper, I said, all right, he reminds me of Lamar Jackson in terms of just how he moves. You said that Jaden Daniels thing. Hey, don't shy away from that comp. I think Keelan Russell at Alabama could have a similar type of season one day to what Jaden Daniels did last year at LSU. I mean, when the opportunity presents itself, Keelan can pick up 15, 20 yards on those design scrambles. So big fan of what he has done this season. I think Alabama's getting a really good one. And you think about Kalen DeBoer, the Crimson Tide, post Jalen Milroe, who is now the darling of all the NFL drafts, mock drafts. Now, Keelan is someone I think, too, could challenge for playing time early.
As an evaluator, it's such a nice feeling to look at the top three quarterbacks on the board, see their senior season, what they're doing, and that just kind of matching up with where you thought they could be at this point in their development. Those three dudes balling out right now. I think the confidence is as high as it's ever been in Bryce Underwood. Tavian St. Clair playing well, and Keelan Russell, man, just continues to kind of work his way into that conversation as one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Another guy in that top 32 right now, Hassan Longstreet, Drew, and it's been an interesting one out there at Corona Centennial. He's committed to Mike Elko and Texas A&M. You look at what he's done this season, 689 yards, 6 touchdowns, 4 INTs. I think that's unfortunately been the biggest thing, is putting the ball in the harm's way. This guy, from an arm talent standpoint, he is a lot of fun, throws the ball with a lot of velo, but he is not afraid to kind of mix it up, and that's where you've seen the turnovers kind of happen a little bit, Drew. I think he's a guy you just got to put a seatbelt on. You got to ride the roller coaster a little bit. There's some ups, there's some downs. There's some games where you watch where you're like, okay, I can get on board with a 5th star here. And there's some other games that say, you know what, I don't know, right? It's a little shaky. I don't know how convicted I feel. But for a guy that's hovering around 6'1" at 6'1.5", I mean, he plays with some torque and he is absolutely fearless. He's got to dial some things in. But outside of that, he's going to be a super, super fun player at the next level.
I just mentioned the name Jalen Milroe, right? And that is my player comp for Hassan Longstreet. And I know it might not be perfect, but I think in the sense where Jalen Milroe, prior to this past Saturday, when he graded out the best passing performance of his career, he would always make some big time throws, right? That would keep you coming back. And he could beat defenses with his legs. He's got this muscled up frame. He isn't 6'3", 6'4". I think Hassan is very similar, Cooper. Was dealing with some injuries at the beginning of the season. That's kind of been the knock on him, right? He was dinged up at the Elite 11 finals, but he is a competitor, right? And since he returned to action, you watch, there are some lapses, I think, in the ball placement, the decision-making, but man, then he'll drop a 2-ball on a tight line deep over the middle, and you're like, wow, okay, that's a big-time throw. That's an NFL throw. I think with him starting to throw a little more with touch, still a lot of fastballs, but the one area where we've seen an uptick where it's like, I didn't know he had this, is him as a power runner, right? On the RPOs, knowing when to pull it and then getting upfield and kind of running through some tackles. So yeah, he's one where you kind of go back and forth. Is it a first round grade, second round grade? Regardless, I think him and Colin Klein's offense there in College Station, it's the perfect fit.
All right, couple other quarterbacks, right? Because I know everybody wants their quarterback to be talked about. Deuce Knight, ranked the number 5 quarterback. He's been in the news for, it just seems like forever, the last 5 or 6 weeks. Is it Auburn? Is it Notre Dame? It's like the Michael Scott office thing, snip, snap, snip, snap. Where's he going to go? We don't know. Just wake me up when it's over. He's played a couple games. He's done some nice things, Drew. I think he's hovering around over 65% completion rate, which is what we wanted to see. We saw an uptick there. He's obviously a dynamic athlete. We've seen that at times this year. Dealing with the right quad injury, it's going to be a little bit of a muddied evaluation. Hopefully we get him healthy at the All-American Bowl if he chooses to participate there. Matt Zoller's in a similar boat. We talked about it with Sean at the top. I think he played 3 or 4 games this season. Dealt with a ankle or leg injury, now out for the rest of the season. So that makes it a little bit of a muddied evaluation. But some names I do want to mention, Drew: Malik Washington, Camario Taylor. You got Jaron Sagapulatele as well. These are some guys as seniors that have done some things that also have elite traits that have our full attention here over the next couple of weeks.
I'm all in on Malik Washington. Hudson Standish on our scouting team continue to bring him up. Malik Washington got his team off to, I think, a 4-0, 5-0 start. Cooper, I don't know if you have dug into the tape, if you have studied him. Talking about another player that seems to be in his skin here as a senior. The confidence is showing up. And he had played a ton of football at Archbishop Spalding heading into it. Another guy that was on my freaks list. I think his ability to alter the arm angle. And he's another one where if the opportunity presents itself, he is not seeking for him to scramble and run. But when he does it, he's hard to get down in the open field. It kind of reminds me a little bit of what we're seeing from Cam Ward at Miami this year, just in terms of how he finds his launching points, how he plays the position, how he fires the tight spirals. He's committed to Maryland right now. I am surprised more schools aren't sniffing around, right? And maybe this is a byproduct of how accelerated the whole recruiting process has been. But I've watched 20 quarterbacks or so. Malik Washington, aside from that big 3, he's the tape I get the most excited about. So you're wondering, are there some other recruiting departments around the country that are looking to potentially upgrade? Malik Washington would make a ton of sense. The other one, Cooper, a guy not in your backyard, but he's in your region, Camario Taylor. I don't know how much you have watched of him, but man, he's ran for 518 yards, 7 touchdowns. He looks to have taken another step as well. And remember him at the Elite 11. I'm talking about the Mississippi State commit. Really rough the first few days, which we expected. I don't think that's his element in terms of going through the drills. And then when they did that 7-on-7 day 3 final day, I think he threw 6 or 7 touchdowns. It was the most of the entire event.
Yeah, when the bullets started flying, he was the light bulb kind of came on for him. It's a very overwhelming setting for some guys, especially you look at Camario Taylor. In him getting out to LA, it kind of took him a few days to acclimate. But, when he gets into that 7-on setting and he doesn't have to think as much and he's just playing, you saw why a lot of people like Camario Taylor. And it's a super intriguing fit under Jeff Lebby. I don't know exactly how that one is going to work out. I like Camario Taylor, the prospect, a lot. So we'll see what happens there. Drew, Malik Washington, like if I was Auburn, I know you're going back and forth between Deuce Knight. Deuce Knight is boomer bust, in my opinion. He is a super high ceiling with a super low floor. And Julian Lewis, another guy that you're looking at, is a very high floor with a limited ceiling, in my opinion. Malik Washington kind of gives you the best of both worlds. He is a big physical frame. He is a gamer, and he's got some developmental upside. I'm with you 110%. I don't really know why a quarterback-needy team out there hasn't been knocking on the door of Malik Washington. So that's going to be interesting to follow. I'm sure there will be some more developments a little bit later in the season. All right, Drew, foot on the gas pedal. We got to hit the accelerator here. But Couple more 5-star topics. Pleading the fifth is what we're going to call this one. And this means that, well, there are a couple guys out there, more than a couple. I counted 12 in my mind, that they're really trying to fight. They're trying to stiff arm those defenders, guys knocking on the door to earn that top 32 status. And they'll have to do this all the way until February. Drew, that's what I got. We have 32 guys in. There's about 12 of them that I think are susceptible in my eyes, or maybe vulnerable to conversations about, you know what, maybe we go in a different direction. I don't know if there's that many guys challenging them, but ultimately I think there's 12 guys that you could have conversations about. Is that fair in your mind?
Yeah, well, you got Ty Haywood on the 12. I'm reading through your notes right here.
I said according to various personnel at 24/7 Sports Scouting Team. That takes everybody's opinion into the conversation.
Give me some Ty Haywood. No, you're right, Coop. And as the senior seasons have played out, we've certainly identified more people that we are comfortable with. We've gotten more exposure to them. We have more of a painted picture. We're talking about teenagers, right? 16, 17, 18-year-olds. There are going to be major physical developments. That's why we continue to harp on the senior seasons, right? Everyone needs to understand with these rankings, we're weighing those senior seasons heavily. We're going to weigh those final exposures at the All-American Bowl, at the Under Armour game, at Alabama, Mississippi, at the Polynesian Bowl. That was the formula for our 2024 rankings. We continue to talk about the 5 stars, the guys at the top of the class from that group. And I think the same thing applies here. So no, you're right. Yeah, there's some guys that I would say are have to show it, I think would be a term. We're still trying to figure them out.
And I'm trying to get ahead of it, but, you know, production comes into it, not just single year production, but multi-year production or multi-year lack of production. Injury history comes into it. You know, you're looking at a guy like Jerome Miles. This is 2 consecutive seasons where he's had a season-ending injury, right? One with an ankle injury last year, this one with a knee. He's an explosive, dynamic player, right? That certainly deserves to be into this conversation. I am using him as an example of the variables that you have to sift through and that you have to weigh when you're projecting a player as a top 32 NFL draft choice. So there's certainly a number of guys that have a lot of different context, a lot of different exposure points. And then you have to weigh that with the guys knocking on the door. And speaking of that, Drew, maybe this conversation's a little bit easier where we can get into some names about this, but some guys knocking on the door. And I kind of want to tee you up here because I want to make sure we get the soundbite. But one of the guys that you love, Dallas Wilson, committed to Oregon, number 40 player in the country. I mean, he is literally knocking on the door. Talk to me about why you like him so much.
Coop, I continue to think that he might be the top prospect in the Sunshine State. I think he is a self-assertive wide receiver out on the perimeter. What do I mean by that? Dallas Wilson, he might not be getting the ball. It might be a run play. He is going to let everyone on the field know that he is playing the football game. He loves to block people. He loves to hit people. And the big thing, Cooper, is he can also get the job done as a wide receiver. You know, I think speed might have been a question at some point. I have no questions after watching what he has done this season. The game that stands out to me against Venice High School, he was taking small gains, racing across the field for 50-yard gains, going up, winning contested 50-50 balls. I'm a big fan of what I have seen from Dallas Wilson so far here as a senior. I think his game's going to translate very well to the next level as a big, large X that is physical and can run. So Dallas Wilson, the Oregon commit out of Tampa Bay Tech, is certainly one that we have highlighted here with a week to go.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. The big one, literally, Michael Carroll, committed to Alabama from IMG Academy. Very punny if you caught it on there. This dude is a hoss, Drew, a big dude, wrestling background, both his parents, collegiate athletes. You turn on the tape of him, he's fun. He looks exactly like every other IMG offensive lineman who has gone on to play on Sundays. Reminded me a little bit of Charles Jagasaw, who is a tackle. I understand that. But he's got a tackle frame. He's playing inside. Originally, I thought to myself, like, this guy should be playing tackle, whether it's the left or right side. But the more you watch him at offensive line, he's just kind of like a brute force who is built to play that type of ball in a phone booth. That is his game. So I got no problem with him at guard. He's fun, dude. Not only is he fun, he's just a total butt kicker at the position. I don't know how you keep a young man like that down, in the rankings. So he's got everything we want, everything we look for.
Obviously, Alabama just beat Georgia. I do think there is some issues that can be addressed on that offensive line. I think the Crimson Tide would like Michael Carroll right now if he was an option in the 2 deep. I think he's that ready to go. And yes, there's going to be an adjustment to the speed. Spending his senior season at IMG Academy, we liked the tape, what he had done as an underclassman up there. Got a chance to see him go through preseason practices. We've watched the game tape. Coop, I think it's the run sets, the pass sets. I mean, this guy, like you said, he's a mauler up front. If he's going to pull and come around, he is putting his assignment in the turf. I think the one play that always keeps kind of getting played in my head, Ty Hawkins has like a 50-yard design quarterback scramble. I mean, Michael Carroll not only is a semi-opening that hole, but he's running with Ty Hawkins, who's one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the class, for a good 20 yards before Hawkins pulls away. So, yeah, really impressed with Michael Carroll. Committed to Alabama, like you said, but I think James Franklin landed the helicopter at IMG a few weeks ago. So the Nittany Lions still chipping away at that one.
It's like a different point in the relationship when the chopper comes out. It goes from like, hey, we're talking a little bit to we're serious. I want to give you the ring, right? We want to take that next step in the relationship. That's what the chopper means in recruiting. Drew, any other names that the fans out there listening that say, hey, you know what? I know there's a new update coming out next week. Are there any other names that I should know here for a potential 5-star?
Yeah, I think I was going to say the 2 Clemson defensive line commits, Amari Adams, Isaiah Campbell, but Isaiah Campbell has since backed off his pledge to the Tigers. A pair of Carolina boys. I think what they have put on tape is very impressive. I think Darren Akinabong committed to Georgia out of New Jersey, kid with a wrestling background. He's younger for the grade, Coop. I like him. I think he is one of these rare 4-eye types. He has turned it on here as a senior. Hopefully we get him in San Antonio at the All-American Bowl. But bottom line, Georgia continues to just find guys at the point of attack. He's certainly one to know as well. And then at Carter Lowe, I think the more we've watched, the more we've learned, the more we've studied this class as a whole, there is some premium talent on the offensive line, not just tackles, but guards as well. Carter Lowe, really like what he's put on tape there. He's committed to the Buckeyes.
All right, guys, just a reminder, we got an update next week, in case you haven't heard. Wednesday, we're very much looking forward to that. The 105 will be there to break it all down. And for everything you need for wall-to-wall recruiting, college football, make sure to check out 247sports.com. Recruiting rankings, transfer portal updates, God knows that's right around the corner as well. Power Mizzou, now part of the 247 Sports family. Make sure to like and subscribe. Let's go. We got it going in our direction. All right, Drew, time for a little college football confidence meter, new segment. Pumped up about this one. Confidence meter, Miami, Clemson, ACC champions, betting odds. The boys like to get out in front of that. Miami right now at plus 150. We look at Clemson. They're not too far behind, plus 175. Those are the odds for those teams to win the ACC. Let's start with Miami. They're at Cal this week, college game day. Excited about that. Here's the remaining schedule, Drew. At Cal, they have a bye week. Then they go to Louisville, Florida State, Duke, at Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and then they finish up at Syracuse. I'm going to start here with a 6. I was back and forth between a 6 and a 7 in terms of my confidence meter. I am confident in this team. This schedule, though, it's going to be tough. I like the fact that they just went through what they went through with Virginia Tech. I think that's only going to heighten their focus, but this is going to be some tough meddling here down the line to see if they can get to the ACC championship, win the ACC championship. The best thing that they have going for them, I love what they have in their backfield with their running backs and Damian Martinez, Mark Fletcher, and then the guy to make it go with Cam Ward, Drew. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm betting on the quarterback. I think they have enough pieces defensively to keep it together. They got to play better, but I'm betting on Cam Ward, and I'm not shying away from it. I've bet on him since the beginning of the season, before this season, about the Heisman Trophy, bet on him with the number 1 pick. I think the kid is super special. If they get to the ACC championship, win the ACC championship, it's going to be because of Cam Ward.
I'm not even mentioning Jordan Lyle, former top 247 running back, making an impact as a true freshman. And hey, Ruben Bain is healthy now. Coop, I didn't know we were picking numbers, so I just came up with one in my head right here. I guess my confidence is like an 8, and you're going to go, whoa, that's a high number. Look, keep thinking about that Virginia Tech game, and I've texted some people, that are very plugged in with the Hurricanes, and they all agree with me. Mark Richt teams lose that game. Manny Diaz teams lose that game. Mario Cristobal in year 3 finds a way to win that game. And then everyone says, well, yeah, that's because of Cam Ward. Well, Mario got Cam Ward. And we touched on this, I think it was Monday's show, or maybe it was our spaces on Saturday morning. Look, Miami had the depth on the defensive line to hang in there. Lots of injuries, and they were still rolling guys through. You have to credit Mario Cristobal for that. I thought the USF game, that was a test. Can they get the job done? This is a spot where they would traditionally come out flat. They get that done, all right? Now it's Virginia Tech on a shorter week. A Virginia Tech team that not a lot of people were giving much of a chance in that game. Miami finds themselves in a dogfight. Get the job done. Now they travel to Cal across the country. It's going to be a late start locally for the Hurricanes. This is the one, right? Can they get the job done? Can they avoid the setbacks? Can they rally from a deficit if they have to? Can they take care of business on the road? I think Miami matches up very well with Cal. I don't know how the Bears are going to block that front 7 for the Hurricanes. I think Fernando Mendoza, who is from South Florida, played at Miami Columbus, Mario Cristobal's alma mater. I think he is in for a long night. We saw what FSU's defensive line was able to do. So I'm confident in Miami.
I mean, you want to be a playoff team, right? I mean, there are a couple mouse traps along the way. At Louisville is going to be tough, but you got a bye week before that. You got Duke coming in right now undefeated at Georgia Tech, a feisty team there. And then to end the season, I mean, Syracuse is one of those teams. They're good enough to really hang in, compete, and win that game. That's going to be at home as well for Syracuse. So a little bit of a testy stretch there. Let's talk about Clemson, Drew, who after week 1, getting blown out by Georgia, has just come alive offensively. We had a lot of questions about Garrett Riley, Cade Klubnik. Is he the guy? What does this look like? Is Dabo slipping? All those things. And granted, the schedule has been the schedule, but they have gone out, executed at a really high level. This offense has looked the best that it's looked in quite some time. Here's the remaining schedule here: at Florida State, at Wake Forest, bye week UVA, Louisville at home, at Virginia Tech, at Pitt. That's the game I want to come back to, Citadel and South Carolina. My confidence meter here in Clemson, it's a 7, and a lot of it has to do with the schedule. I know I said 6 for Miami. I'm saying 7 here for Clemson because I think the schedule sets up for them perfectly. You got a team struggling in Florida State. Wake Forest lost to ULL last week. I think Clemson, Dabo Swinney, and Garrett Riley and Cade Klubnik are in a really good position to really build some momentum as a program and really kind of stick a fork in the roster building philosophy stuff, which I think is going to continue to come up, right? I think the biggest thing is continuity and success and continuing to do that. And Clemson has obviously been a model for success, but what does this look like in the national picture? I think Clemson's got a great opportunity to cash in their chips, get into the playoffs this year. And I kind of like the way it sets up for them, Drew. I think they are in control of their own destiny here, as the folks typically like to say.
Are they all in on the freshman wide receivers? Are they finally kind of letting those guys run wild?
I think so. Between Wesco and TJ Moore, I texted you the other day. I think TJ Moore is getting ready to break out. I think Wesco as well. They got Cole Turner, nice little piece there as well that they can move around. They got some pieces. Phil Maffa has been very strong in the run game. And you got to give Matt Luke a lot of credit with the job that he's done with that offensive line. So, credit to Clemson, what they've done. Have they had a real test since Georgia? Probably not. But they have aced everything that's been put in front of them. It's the same thing you said about Miami. I'm not going to ding a team for doing what they're supposed to do, and that's exactly what Clemson's done.
Oh, we just need to see that offensive young talent show up in the games when it matters, right? It's easy to do it against Appalachian State, NC State. They struggled. I thought the Stanford result was notable let's see what happens at Florida State this weekend, Saturday night. I think a lot of people had initially, a couple months ago, thought this is a game of the year situation or one that was going to dictate the CFP picture. Now Florida State, you kind of read some of the insider practice reports, very concerned about what's going on there in Tallahassee. And I think there's an opportunity for Dabo and Clemson to run it up this weekend. I want to know if Dabo does it. I want to know, hey, I'm not taking my foot off the pedal, right? I want to make a statement, much like Georgia did against us week 1. So that's kind of a storyline. So I'm keeping my eye on as we get into week 6.
All right. Speaking of running it up, I need 2 things. I need a number out of you on the confidence meter so I can hold you to it later. Do you have one of those?
If TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco are given full go by the Pitt game, I'm going to be at an 8. Right now I'm at a 6, and we'll go from there. I worry about the depth, man. I worry about some injuries. If Cade were to go down, who they are running way more, it's a completely different team.
Chris Vizina, Birmingham's finest. Shout out. All right, we got a 8 confidence meter in Miami, a 6 confidence meter in Clemson from Drew. And I have a 6 in Miami and a 7 in Clemson. The other thing, you talked about running it up. You sent me that clip of Florida State and Mike Norvell running at practice, and he was only racing one other player. How does that typically go? Give me a little bit of context on that. So you typically race the whole team, and this time the team, it's just one player said, I'll race you?
Yeah, I don't know. I just remember a few weeks ago in the talent tracker, I wrote about the potential roster rebuild for Prime at Colorado. My new concern is Florida State here in 2025. Like, how many transfers are they going to have to take? That recruiting class is losing members quickly. 10 weeks before signing day, how many high school kids are they going to be able to get in the boat? How many current players on the roster are going to look for a new home? I mean, we could be talking about 20, 30 in the transfer portal. It's going to be an interesting December for the Seminoles.
All right, speaking of portal, we got 2 minutes. We got to do this quick. Upset alert, week 6. Ole Miss, the king of the portal, loses to Kentucky last week. A little bit of a shock. They're ranked number 6. They're at South Carolina this week. Then they're at LSU. They are minus 9.5 favored in that game against South Carolina. Drew, I saw South Carolina up close and personal against the Tigers. That defense is pretty legit. And this Ole Miss offensive line, they struggle with Kentucky, albeit a pretty good defense. 9.5 feels a little rich. I don't know how you feel about it.
I'm worried. I would be worried about the pass pro, keeping Jackson Dart upright. Dylan Stewart, he's kind of faded into the shadows with the 2 freshman wide receivers. Prime opportunity for him to be Chris Hummer's 24/7 Sports True Freshman of the Week, right? To make a big impact. No, I think that's a good pick, Cooper. The other one we got written down, what is it? Washington and Michigan?
That's right. Big Ten football in Seattle. Yep. Washington minus 2.5. I came away like Washington, would they miss 5 field goals versus Rutgers? I thought they played well for the most part. I've been really impressed with them under Jed Fish. They've lost to Washington State in the Apple Cup. We knew it was going to be a rebuilding year. They're a competitive football team. Them being favored in this game, a little bit of a surprise. We got our boy Steve Belichick going up against Sharon Moore, Alex Orji. Can they shut down Alex Orji on the ground, make him one-dimensional? We'll see. 2.5, I can kind of get on board with that. I think that's what the game's going to come down to, but I kind of like UW here.
Keep bringing up the name with Washington, Damon Williams. I think this is the week. He took the 3rd offensive snap for Washington against Rutgers. They let him throw a pass. I don't know. I think Damon Williams could have a key moment against the defending national champions. And Alex Orji, I still have some concerns. I mean, Michigan has a recipe to win the game, and they got to stick to it. Every measurement has to be exact. What time is this game? Is this a night game?
I have no idea.
No
idea. I'm prepared on that. Sorry, I didn't have it in the rundown. I hope it's a night game. That would be fun. Perfect time in Seattle. October, beautiful.
The night slate is setting up well. You got Florida, UCF, Miami, Cal. Got a bunch of people coming to the Ivins household, so it's going to be a long night.
4:30 p.m. local. It's from our boy LL in the chat. LL, we see you. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. Drew, that's all I got. Any final thoughts, my friend?
No, rankings update coming out. Lots of movement, lots of tape watching. It has been fun. I'm also supposed to play golf with Tom Lloyd tomorrow.
There you go. Love that. When do you guys work? I'd love to know.
Yeah, okay.
That's a joke. Guys, we appreciate you watching, listening to the 105. Reminder, you can find us on Mondays at 2 o'clock Eastern time on CBS Sports Network at the Mothership. You can also find us right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel on Wednesdays at 1 o'clock Eastern time. And if you're listening over the airwaves, please do us a favor. Leave a review. Rate the show. Guys, we'd love the opportunity to get your feedback. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure for Andrew Ivins. I'm Cooper Petagna. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next time.